Hi everyone, welcome to Off the Podium. It's been maybe about 4 months since I've done one of these in person, but I'm very excited to welcome our next guest, Steve Kirk. Welcome to Off the Podium.
Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure.
Reading about you, it was really interesting because I read about all the work you've done with video games and your music career. Why don't you start us off with that for those who don't know about you?
The video game career, you mean?
Sure, or even before that, because I know you've had an even longer.
Before my video game career began, I was playing in bands, and when I was in high school, I was in the high school jazz band, and before I started, and also before working on video games, I was in a band called the Clubfoot Orchestra that did original scores for silent films, which really helped my reading. And also I was able to write some stuff for that band, which was great. Really good bunch of people, and a really fun band. And at the time, which was the early 90s, I don't really think anyone else was doing that. Now, lots of people are doing it, including symphony orchestras are going, well, let's play the Star Wars score live to the film, which is great.
Yeah.
It does bring people in. I mean, this was a band that played in clubs and did okay, I guess, but they really became kind of a phenomenon when they started doing this thing, because they would perform in movie theaters. We had a conductor who would have all of the cues worked out, and the musicians would not be looking at the film that much unless there were improvisation sections. It was largely composed through, and we had a conductor showing us how to go.
Yeah.
And she's still doing it, and they actually have a gig coming up in the Bay Area.
Wow.
In September. But there are huge gaps in between gigs sometimes, because everyone has different projects. I was very proud to be in that band and work with that band. Shortly after that, I had the opportunity to work for the leader of that band, who was writing music for Atari games in Milpitas, which at the time was called Time Warner Interactive. And that's how I learned to do music on computers.
Wow.
I was a paid intern for a year and a half, and then after that, I started getting some sound effects type work, which is different than sound design nowadays, where you kind of have to know more stuff. I was just creating sounds, and programmers were implementing that stuff in games, and now you kind of have to do both. So I still do that kind of work if people want me to, and that's fine. Usually when you're doing music for an indie company, they go, well, do you do sound effects too? Actually, that could be true of any game. It's like, do you offer full services? And if there's anything I can't do, I can always hire an assistant, but mainly what I do is write music.
So I must ask,
Sure.
You were born in San Diego, I think.
That's right.
You lived for a long time in San Francisco, in the Bay Area?
Yeah, for almost 38 years, actually.
Why Seattle?
Well, I did live in Seattle when I was in junior high and high school.
I see. Okay.
My parents moved up here. My dad was a TV anchorman, and he got a job broadcasting the news in Seattle. So that was at Cairo.
Okay.
And that was a long time ago.
So if someone wants to, you kind of had an unusual path to doing what you do, but if someone wants to do it, what's a path for a young composer wanting to do what you do?
Well, if speaking from the point of view of someone that hasn't worked in a while, the last reasonable sized game that I worked on was the Ron Gilbert game Thimbleweed Park, and that was a couple of years ago at this point. So it's always hard, and it really just depends on it really depends on if you're good at making friends. As just like in any career, and I think that's the hard thing for artists to grapple with.
Because we spend so much time in the practice rooms, and we spend so much time really concentrating on music, we forget about the other aspects.
It gets comfortable, and you think you're doing your job because you are doing your job, and then you go, well, why do I have to spend blah blah amount of money to fly down to San Francisco and go to GDC and shake a bunch of people's hands, and the short answer is to be nice, and to be a better person, and more acknowledging of your colleagues and stuff. And if you get some work out of it, that's great. But you shouldn't go down there expecting to get work. You should expect to maybe see these people again, and over some period of time, you become familiar enough that people are actually interested in what you do.
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, it's worked for me off and on.
Yeah.
I would not say I'm the world's greatest at that sort of thing, but I try. And in fact, it's really helped me in the last few years because I've been focusing on doing that more. But it's an interesting turn in my career because I'm not working on a video game currently. I'm playing in a jazz band up here, Ron Jones's band up in Stanwood. Do you know about the Jazz Forest Band? Yeah, well, Ron Jones is a great composer. If you don't know him by name, you've undoubtedly heard his work because he wrote music for Star Trek, The Next Generation, a lot of that stuff. He and another guy, Walter Murphy, wrote all the Family Guy stuff where they're using, live big bands, orchestras, the whole schmear, Anyway, a few years ago, he moved up to Stanwood and he put together a jazz band, and through my buddy, Steve Turnage, I was able to meet him and visit his studio and express my interest in what he was doing because I think he kind of wants to turn the Northwest around a little bit. And, if anyone can do it, he can do it. And I'm in his jazz band right now. I'm doing a session tomorrow, in fact.
Wow.
And it's kind of an honor.
Yeah.
Even though I've been playing for a long time. I mean, he's been in the thick of it down in L.A. he was there for, I think, 37, 38 years, something like that.
That's amazing.
And I mean, you probably heard some Scooby-Doo episodes that he ghost wrote, or some Magnum P.I. episodes. Seriously, he's all over that.
And there's so many interesting people that either were born and raised or spent some time here in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle specifically, or people who came up and live here. It's such an interesting place. But then again, the music scene at times might feel frustrating.
Well, and back to the question, why Seattle? There's a number of things. And one was that I've been living in the Bay Area for a long time, and I was going through a divorce, and work was dropping off. And I fell in love with the woman who I'm married to now, Janine, and so that's the main reason for moving up. But also, there's a very vibrant game audio community up here. And I discovered there's some amazing jazz musicians. So that's great because that's kind of what I thought I was forfeiting when I left the Bay Area, because I work with some phenomenal people down there, and they're all my close friends. So it was it seemed like a lot to give up, but I went, oh man, there's got to be something going on up here. But I didn't really know. And so the last couple of years, I've just kind of been exploring the possibilities, and, playing gigs with Ron's band has been really, really fruitful for me. When you're in a studio and you're writing music, and even if you're recording a lot yourself, because I play a lot of guitars and bass and all of that stuff, when you go out and do the show, you realize, oh man, I really need to practice. There's no end to that one, as you know. There's no end to, oh man, I really need to work on this thing. Man, this 12-year-old can blow me away with his sweep picking. So maybe I should start doing a little bit. It's like that. But Ron's stuff is great for anyone that needs to get their shit together sight reading. Boy, he writes stuff out. He doesn't just give you chord slashes and stuff. And if he does give you chord slashes, he gives you the chords with every single partial attached to it.
So you have no way out.
You have to find the color tones. You can't play 14 notes, right, on a guitar, so you have to find the colored notes, and that's what jazz people do. Yeah. And so that's great, because not being able to actually call myself a bona fide jazz musician, but rather more of an aficionado that learns to play what I need to learn to play. Wow, it's a good gig. Yeah, it's a good gig.
I was going to go back and ask you two things. One, prior to your video game career, a big moment that you felt like it's a big moment for you, and maybe during your video game career, what's a big break or maybe a project that you worked on?
Well, I don't know how much Yeah, it was a big break. Clubfoot Orchestra got hired to do the score for a series of Felix the Cat cartoons in the early '90s called The Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat. So there were 9 of us, and I think we did one season, 13 episodes. I'm not exactly sure about the count, but we actually got hired by CBS to write music for a cartoon for a season. And then they decided that they wanted to move in another direction, is what you always see in the quotation marks, right? I think we were really kind of outside, which the creators of the show really liked. But the guy that owned the rights to Felix himself was not crazy about us. He wanted to do the music himself. And so CBS said, okay, that's enough. But, I have a bunch of YouTube videos that are all of these cues from the cartoons edited together.
Oh, interesting.
And there's about 13 of them or something like that. Not 13. Something like 10 or 12 little mini suites that I have up on my YouTube channel just so that people can go, oh, this is what the music sounded like before it became completely obliterated by this explosion sound, which is... the sound effects on Saturday morning cartoons, especially in the '90s, it seems, were really aggressive.
Yeah.
And so that dominated most of the soundscape a lot of the time. We pushed for as much, audibility as we could, but you can only push so much, and then they just fire you. So
what's a big video game project?
But that was a big break. So the big video game project, and it was a huge break because it was probably one of the best video game gigs I've ever had before or since, and there was a budget to hire live musicians. So that would have been the Voodoo Vince game I did in 2002, 2003 for a game designer named Clayton Kozlarek, and we were doing this for original Xbox. And it was a game based on the life of a voodoo doll, and the music was... this is what he asked for. This is the cool part. He wanted some left of center psychedelic New Orleans style music for this game, and it can include all of these Zydeco, traditional blues of New Orleans, all of these different New Orleans styles, second line, all of that stuff. And me and John Haynes, the drummer for the project, we actually researched New Orleans drum beats and did a couple of sessions where he just laid down grooves. Some of those became songs. I just edited the drum parts together, and some of those became songs, and others were arranged, and he would come in later and play those. But that really informed the quality of the game. Having live musicians really, really helped. So sometimes I'd set up a MIDI mock-up or whatever, and John would come and play later, or sometimes the whole session was based around his drum beat. And then I would have usually 3 horns, alto, trumpet, and trombone come in and record their stuff together so that they could watch each other and work out articulations together. I wrote out some articulations, and they wrote some in too. Anyway, it ended up being a great project. There was over 3 hours of music in that game, and I think that's kind of a rarity until you start getting into the multiplayer online scenario.
And how long did that take for you to complete that project?
I wrote all that music, 3 hours of music, in 6 months.
That's crazy.
That means writing, arranging, printing out whatever parts you need to print out, because I didn't have a budget for an assistant, so I just did all the work. 6 months of that, and then I spent another 3 or 4 months doing the sound effect. They had started with somebody that but they decided they wanted me to come in and do the sound effects, so that maybe the sonic intent of the sound effects would more match the music. And in fact, a lot of the stuff kind of harmonizes. It's kind of pretend interactive, because it doesn't genuinely interact with the music, other than that, we thought about. I thought very strongly about how am I going to make this half musical and half sound effecty so it will actually blend in to the music backdrop. So that was really fun, actually. I got to come up here and spend some time in Washington. I went to high school up here, and so it's kind of cool to be back. And I actually found out that Ron Jones went to the same high school I did.
Wow, which one's that?
Sammamish.
Okay. Wow. I always ask this question, kind of off topic, not music, but or maybe music, a life-changing moment.
Is this where people like bring up near death experiences? And
You
stuff?
can, but some people talk about musical, life-changing experiences. Some say personal things. Whatever you want to share with us.
Well, a life-changing moment for me came very early in life when I first heard Frank Zappa and realized, I mean, when I started, it was a long time ago. I mean, I started taking guitar lessons in '65. I mean, I was a little kid. I started taking, I think, when I was 8. And I loved playing the guitar, and I loved the Beatles. And I was, every year I'd get a Beatles album for Christmas. And when Sgt. Pepper came out, that was amazing. That was one real turning point. But the turning point in terms of how it affected me directly in terms of what I would do later in my life, I think it was probably hearing Absolutely Free by Frank Zappa, which was a '67 release I didn't end up hearing until late '67 or '68 because my friend Greg Griffith was a fan, and we had just moved in front of his house, and we were both, I guess, 10 years old or something. But what struck me about that music was how wildly chaotic it seemed, and then you realized that it was really intricately structured in many, many ways, and there was this kind of melding between wild improv, really intensely visualized vision of harmony and attitude. And I mean, he really is he is like a 20th century composer at heart.
True. Yeah.
And
he was so inspired by some.
We're talking. I mean, his major influences or Varese, Stravinsky, Webern.
Yeah.
So and I love all of that stuff too. And I discovered that through his music.
Yeah.
So I discovered that the whole angle of contemporary classical music and electric acoustic instruments like electric guitars kind of intertwining, and it's really kind of how I think about music now. And if I'm doing music for a video game, and it usually ends up being kind of a hybrid orchestra where there are what would be maybe previously referred to as rock instruments blended in with orchestral instruments. I really haven't landed a game yet where there was a budget to hire a real orchestra, so I have to work very hard to make the stuff sound as musical as I can.
Yeah.
I mean, I have some good quality libraries, but if you have any experience with that, you'll know that it's kind of like the tail wagging the dog. To get the strings to sound right, you have to really go around the bend, and people do it all the time, and then they hope for the day that they can hire an orchestra. And I guess maybe I'm the same. That I'm one of those guys, but I will go out of my way to make sure that what I have sounds musical.
Yeah.
So whatever I can replace with a live instrument, I do. No orchestra yet.
Yeah, someday it'll happen.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, sometimes I see these video game conferences or game events where they have 5 or 10,000 people in an arena, and people are playing games there, and it's like a sporting event where all these people come to watch a couple of people play video games, and there's also a live orchestra. Did you ever imagine it would get to that point?
I've never been to one of those.
I guess it's mostly in Asia.
As much as I respect, and I'm a member of the Game Audio Network Guild, and Tommy Tallarico does video games live, and he's had great success with that, where he tours with the live orchestra and plays video game music. And that's cool. There are some great orchestral writers living in the game of, living in the video game world, because there's no place else to live.
Yeah.
I mean, how many commissions are there?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's more than I think there are.
There are many, but none of them that really pay. It's really unfortunate. I mean, composers get excited, and you'll see some of my friends, they get so excited when they get a commission.
Yeah.
But the reality is, and I'm very happy for them, because it's tough to even get a commission. But at the same time, from the financial perspective, it does not pay much.
The last commission I got for an esoteric art piece was $100.
It's tough. I mean,
you can't live on that. I mean, but regardless of the opportunity to write a piece for an orchestra would be a great thing to have, and I would do anything that I could to be able to pull something like that off, even if it didn't pay well. Yeah. So maybe something like that is what I'm looking for in the future, a little bit more maybe.
You know, a lot of musicians talk about depression, talk about, you know, going through tough times. Any moments like that, and what advice would you give to young musicians? Because I feel like I meet so many people, especially some colleagues that are going through some tough times. Has there been moments like that for you, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, I think. Well, you're a musician, so you know that it's a tough life.
Mm-hmm.
Good advice is, I would say, that you just need to keep doing stuff. You just need to keep working. And of course you want to try to make a living at it, but it really, you're doing it for a reason that is more important than making a living, which is you have to do it.
Yeah.
If that's the way you feel about your art, then just keep doing it and do it whenever you can. And try to cultivate your professional lifestyle as best you can, but don't be surprised if it takes a different turn than you thought it was going into, and learn to and try to appreciate whatever financial success you have as much as you can. And this is a really hard lesson to learn. It was hard for me to learn, and I'm still learning it. It's like, how do you work for a client and remain happy with your writing? I mean, I've made a pledge to myself to never write something, never hand over something to a client that I didn't feel that I liked myself.
But that could also jeopardize your career, because they might want something and you can't give them the thing that... does that jeopardize the career a little bit?
And maybe it's possible. It's possible that does, but I think you want to work with those people less. And you discover whatever success you end up enjoying will, you know, your success may end up going in a different direction than you had previously thought. You get to the point where you can tell, where you can kind of smell that a relationship with a client might not end up being ideal. I feel like, yes, of course, people are going to want to ask for revisions, but if they're asking for endless revisions with no extra pay, that's not a contract you want to sign. Mm-hmm. You maybe want to work out a contract that says, okay, I can do 2 revisions, and then if you want a 3rd revision, then we need to discuss you paying for an additional cue of music. Yeah. And that usually works, and if it doesn't work, then you should think about saying yes to something like that. And I think that, you know, there are a lot of young composers that really, really want to do music for video games, and that's great. But don't give it away. Yeah. Get something for it. Even if it's not money, get something for what you're doing. Yeah. You know, I guess.
Hobbies?
I used to have no hobbies. So whenever I wasn't, you know, working, I was just, you know, goofing off. But I'm really into riding bikes now. I'm super into bike
And you're in a great city, somewhat.
No. It's a great city for bike riding. So I try to go bike riding at least 3 or 4 times a week. My wife and I like to go out bike riding. And she kind of, she didn't expect me to do it. And at some point I just said, but she was an avid bicyclist. And at some point I said, you know, I think I need to kick up my workout regimen, you know, kick my workout regimen up a notch. Yeah. And it looks like you really enjoy riding the bike. And so we got a bike, and I've been doing that for a year. Wow. I'm going to do Bike MS this September. It'll be great. You
talked about how a dream maybe is to have a live orchestra and record with that. Any other musical dreams that you feel like you have not accomplished, or it's on your list to do, you know, you really want to get to that point in life where you do something musical?
Well, every composer wants more resources to be able to do bigger projects. So I would say that I'm in that boat. Is you know, it would be nice to be making the sort of income where I could do whatever I wanted to do within some kind of scope of reason. You know, so I guess that's kind of a broad answer, but that's really the answer. It's, if I had more money, I could hire an orchestra. I do have a recording studio, so that's great. So I can do stuff in here that's basically finished. So that's a big dream come true for me. I don't have to rent out time in the studio. It sounds great in here. Get great sounds. I can record drums, brass. You know, I will do tracks for people that are putting together their pop songs, either locally or, you know, via FTP. And that's been successful. That's been great. So I get to work with Ryan Brown, who you may or may not know, but is a really superb drummer that was touring with Zappa Plays Zappa.
Wow.
He's touring now with Zappa Plays Zappa.
Oh, wow.
And I wrote a song with my best friend, the same guy I met when I moved to Woodland Hills when we were 10 years old, who introduced me to Frank Zappa.
Huh.
So isn't that interesting? And we're doing a song that the two of us wrote together, and he has offered to play drums on it.
Wow.
So my friend lives in L.A., so that... I don't know how that happened, honestly, but he's just very good at being a friendly guy that shakes hands and hangs out well and stuff like that. So I guess that's how that worked. Also, we're all huge Zappa fans.
Yeah. It's so amazing with this podcast, and it's maybe because I tell people that I enjoy Zappa and I love not only him as a musician, but him as a personality and an outspoken person about world events and everything else that's happening, that was happening in the country at the time. But I've just met so many people like you who are Zappa fans or have worked with someone who's been connected with Zappa. So it's just such an amazing place to be from my perspective, hearing from fellow Zappa fans.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because I think I'm older than you, like a lot. And he was around at a time when there really wasn't anyone else out there telling the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of people in the 60s, I guess, that were telling the truth. But he was really telling a different kind of truth. It was very interesting. And he was an intellectual. And it really appealed to kids like us to hear music that wasn't the same old stuff.
And looking back from my perspective, even though I wasn't really listening to Zappa at the time when he was around, the crazy thing is that he had so many fans that listened to his music and followed him. I mean, it wasn't huge numbers, but it was still...
It was very cult-like.
Yeah.
It was very avid. And
I'm surprised.
He probably has more fans now because I think his son...
Weasel?
Weasel is... Well, he's more approachable than Frank in some ways.
Yeah.
I mean, Frank could be a little ornery.
Yeah.
But I think he has done a whole lot towards introducing Frank's music to people in general in a way that is very, approachable.
Yeah.
He's done a great job. I mean, that's a very accurate band. They do really, really accurate renditions of those arrangements, and it's really impressive. I've seen those guys about 5 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
I still have to see them. I feel terrible as a Zappa fan that I have
Coming
not
to the Neptune.
Are they really soon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I forget when it is. Is it December? It might be December.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would have to.
That's a good place to see a band like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Anything that we've missed that you want to...
I don't know. I didn't know I was going to talk this much.
Well, thank you so much. It's been
You're
great.
welcome.
Hope we do this again.
Yeah.